Adam, you're on.
So this is working.
Yes, everybody can hear, right? Somebody wave in the field, yes? Okay, awesome.
Yes, we can hear.
Am I like on the thing? Oh, there we go. I'm like talking to the back of everyone's head. Actually, let me get my. First off, I apologize. I'm dragging quite a bit today. I got back after midnight from Canada, which we were pretty successful raising money for our Texas acquisition. And I've been in 4 countries in the last week. So I think I'm pretty jet lagged. Anyway, so I know what joke I wanted to say, and it's going to be what I'm going to talk about, which is it's a quote from Mark Twain, where he says, if you read the newspaper, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read the newspaper, you're misinformed. And the reason I thought that was good for today is, I'm not really going to talk politics, but I am going to talk the economy. So, and that's going to also tie into, a lot of people have been asking me about why are we selling in Florida? Why are we buying in the upper Midwest? Why Houston? And a lot of it has to do with where we see the economy going. So anyone who watches the news, people have been talking more and more now about a coming recession. And most of the time when we think of a recession, we think of the stock market dropping, we think of the real estate market dropping, and you think of what happened in, say, 2008 and 2009, or you think of the tech burst in 2000, 2001, 2002. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen in that particular manner. So now the question is, why is that? Most of the time when you have a major market problem, it's a meltdown, and people don't see it coming. I wrote an article, I think it was in LinkedIn, and we also published it on a few different websites about a melt up. So how could you have a recession where things go up? And if you look at the 1970s, I think that's our closest example to what happened, which is in and around 1970, we basically just went completely off the gold standard. Interest rates went to about 20%, which is pretty inconceivable if you were to think about that today. Imagine getting a mortgage and it was 20%, or just putting money in your checking account and getting 20% interest on it. We might actually save money more than we would, because right now we get basically 0% in our checking account. If you want to get a mortgage, it doesn't cost very much. You want to get a car loan, think about what that would mean if you went to get a car loan and your interest payment was 20%. So things were very, very different in the 70s. Well, going off of the gold standard is essentially like making a lot of money appear from nowhere, which is pretty much what has been happening in our economy. And it's not really a political thing, meaning if you look at whether it's Bush, Obama, or Trump, pretty much all of them spend a tremendous amount more money than we collect in taxes. So the only way that you can do that is you have to print a lot of money, which is what the Federal Reserve does, and borrow a lot of money, which we've now been doing. And every year, regardless of which political party is in charge, it's pretty much the same thing, which is where we're just printing a lot of money and we're spending a lot of money. And a lot of people justify that for whatever their political purposes are. But the purpose of what I'm talking about is not, for or against any political party. It's kind of just the facts, which is we started dropping interest rates again. And in one of the articles I wrote, it was about that that interest rates are going to be dropped this year. And it was funny because I was talking to a lot of people, and everyone said I was crazy, but we've now done it a couple times this year, and they may cut rates again. So what does that do? That's essentially just putting a lot more money into the system, meaning credit cards are more available, student loans are more available, there's more money out there to get loans to buy apartments, there's more money in the system. They're actually doing a lot of bailouts right now for farms in the upper Midwest and throughout the US, because farms have been having an issue. And I kind of remember this. If you go back to 2008 and 9, they were dropping rates and they're doing lots of bailouts. What happens in the future from there? Prices go up. The stock market has tripled in the last 10 years, which is really unprecedented. If you look at what we were paying for apartments, we paid $35,000 an apartment for most of the apartments in Central and Northern Florida, and most of them are now selling for $90,000 to $100,000 per apartment. Is this sustainable? A lot of people think that the market's going to correct and the prices are going to come back down. I don't think that's going to happen. And the reason I don't think that's going to happen is, unlike in 2007, where interest rates were relatively high compared to today, meaning you could get 5% in your checking account or your savings account or your money market account, something like that. It was a meaningful return. Interest rates were higher if you wanted to get a mortgage or a car loan. So when they dropped it, they did it after the market had started to go down. So Lehman Brothers had imploded. A lot of the subprime lenders were imploding. And then they started cutting rates. And that was why the market kind of bottomed out in, I think it was March of 2009. So just over 10 years ago. If you looked at today, interest rates are already low. They're already really low. And they're already cutting rates. And if you follow any of the interesting tweets that go out there, Trump has been asking for the Federal Reserve to cut rates more. And I think he called him knuckleheads or boneheads. And most of the other country, or a lot of the other countries, actually have negative interest rates. And Trump has been pushing the Federal Reserve to cut rates to go negative. And I think it's probably going to happen. I think that they are going to cut rates to where they're going to get close to zero, and they may even go negative. So what does that really mean? If you think of that, it's really kind of a funny thing. Like if you borrowed, say you took out a mortgage of $300,000 to buy a house, negative interest rates means that you only pay the bank back like $250K. It's really like difficult to think about in terms of what a negative interest rate is. It's, well, hey, instead of making 0.2% return on your savings account, now if you put money in the bank, you're actually going to have to pay the bank to hold your money. Negative interest rates is a crazy thing, but what it will do is it will stop prices from dropping. It will ensure that prices don't drop. Meaning real estate prices don't really drop. The stock market in December started to drop a bit, and I think that's why they cut rates. So what does that mean? Well, I think what we're going to have is called stagflation. Stagflation is where the real estate market and the stock market kind of are flat. Unemployment goes up, but most of what happens, or most of what goes up, will be oil, so price at the pump, and food costs and commodity costs, which is really what happened in the 1970s, where interest rates started to go up, all the commodities started to go up, and all the markets, for the most part, were flat. So if that's the case, then what do we do as a company? I think what we're doing right now is very smart in the sense that we're diversifying between states. I think that the Midwest and also Houston is a great place to be, because if they keep pumping money into the system, eventually that is going to push commodities and oil up tremendously. And what states are going to benefit from that? Well, I think Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Texas will tremendously benefit from that. I also think by being in affordable multifamily, that's going to really benefit as well, because during any type of recession, whether it's a melt up or melt down, affordable apartments typically have the lowest vacancy and are the best place to be, and Class A apartments get wrecked one way or another. It's also, you look, we've been having wages go up. salaries have gone up also in the last number of years. It's kind of a regular occurrence. And millennials have become notorious for job hopping. They'll hop to a new job every year or two. And I think for the job hoppers, I think it's going to be a really bad thing during stagflation. Because when wages start to flatten out and prices start to flatten out, employers, and I can tell you that we do this here, when you're looking to hire someone, if someone hops jobs every single year, why would you want to hire them? So the people that show that they can work at a company for an extended amount of time, and if they're going to move, they're not moving every year. I mean, no one, and I spoke about this at the summer event, I mean, it's unrealistic to work at one company for your entire life, but it also doesn't really make sense to change jobs every 6 months. That's really not a good practice. It's not good for the company, and I don't think it's good for the person, because you can never really develop relationships. You can never really grow. You're just in a forever onboarding process, which is really just ridiculous. So I guess to summarize stagflation, it's a really complicated topic because, and I don't know if anyone here had watched the movie Big Short. If you haven't watched it, I would recommend it because it's really fascinating what happened in the lead up to the meltdown in 2008, 2009. But one of the guys who completely called the subprime crisis was a guy named Peter Schiff. And I remember reading his book in 2007, Crash Proof. And people used to, there's some funny clips on YouTube with him. But he used to go on CNBC and Bloomberg and everyone was laughing at him. And then 2008 and 2009 happened, which was pretty much what he predicted. So then they just stopped inviting him to come on TV. But his newest prediction has been along the lines of the stagflation prediction. And he's writing a book right now, and he just titled it, Told You So. Something like that. So I think as a company, this is really what we're preparing for. And this also is another reason besides just what we talked about is for the third-party property management. I think being in, if you can do for a good price property management, I think that will be a great place to be during stagflation because it's a fee-based business. And if you have economies of scale, you can make good money and you don't have the risk of owning the asset. And I think owning assets in a lot of markets are going to be really, really risky because I think, as an example, what if utilities and taxes and insurance and all your expenses are going up a lot faster than the rents? Typically when we underwrite a deal, we always put, well, if we're going to put in a bunch of money, rents are going to go up 2 or 3%, and expenses will go up 1 or 2%. Well, what if it's the other way? What if expenses are going up 5%, rents are only going up 2%? So I think these are a lot of things that overall the market hasn't really started pricing into real estate prices, pricing into really any underwriting models, but this is going to happen. And I guess I'll just segue into the, are you going to put the slides up here? I'll segue that into the Did We Win slide for the Q3 priorities, which is identify third-party property management company. We've identified a number of third-party property management companies. We met with one in Melbourne, Florida, which is kind of a diversified company. I think they have 60 properties. They don't have any multifamily. They do have some homes and condos. They have retail, medical office, industrial. That's really what I think we're going to be going after. The idea would be wherever we own properties right now. So if you think of Florida, Northern Georgia, Houston, that's really where we would focus on buying like a mom and pop company. And then, so instead of buying properties, we'd be buying the company and the third party. So that's going to be something that we're working on right now. We're basically going under contract on this company in Melbourne, and we are bidding on one, hopefully very large company which has almost 30,000 units. That's just multifamily, but a lot of it's going to be, I think, we're going to pick a handful of mom and pop companies and work on acquiring them and see how that goes. The second one, which is portfolio under contract, we have Eagle under contract. Lake of the Woods is set to sell in the middle of October. Sadiq Acquisitions is not under contract. We're working on that. So stay tuned on that. Implement programs that result in no residents over 60 days and 8% of bad debt collected. I would give us red on that, but I guess I would give us red. That's something that we have to improve on. Accounts receivable is going to be a major focus for us in Q4. High five to Sioux Falls finishing much less than 7% vacancy. That was awesome. Keep it up. Keep the first portfolio under 7%. And let's get the rest of them under 7% as well. But that was great. That was super green. And the employee programs related to praise. We are doing tons and tons of stuff related to praise, and not just praise, but also communication, recognition. I think our net promoter score, which came in at 45%, which was amazing. And I'm really excited about that. That's a major effort, but that's going to be also another major focus kind of forever, is the idea of employee engagement and praise. And Christine will probably talk more on that. Hirsch was looking at me. Hirsch, did you have any questions on something?
I want to ask about stagnation.
You can ask the question.
Okay, so you said something about stagnation that
Stagflation.
That it will be negative interest rates. And you gave an example that it was $300,000 loan, you have to pay back $250,000. So the first part of the question is, what does that mean? Does the bank lose that amount of money? And the second thing is, how does it relate to us that when our debt service would go down, and wouldn't that affect this purchasing?
Okay.
That's my question.
Sure. Okay, so the question that Hirsch is asking is negative interest rates, how does that really work and how does that make any sense? And then also, if we're borrowing money to buy apartments, by the rates going down, would that help us in terms of our debt service going down? Is that right? Okay, so it's hard to make sense of that, I would say, but typically the way that banks make money, and this is the example that I'll give, if a bank is paying you, let's say 1%, if you put your money into a CD, and it's a 1-year CD and they pay you 1%. What the bank historically does is they take that money and they lend it to someone, let's say at 4%. So they're paying you 1, they're lending it 4, and that 3% spread is their profit. That's how they pay for their buildings and their employees and what they give to their shareholders, etc. So what does negative interest rates mean? Negative interest rates is really the same type of concept where you have a spread between what they're paying you in the bank and then what they're lending it at. They still have to make money. It just doesn't really logically make sense. So right now, you know, the example of the mortgage, the mortgage could be, I don't know, negative 3%. I mean, it sounds like crazy, but all they're doing is there's a spread and it's just negative between what they're basically charging you in the bank. So if they're charging you, let's say 1% to put your money there, it's the same thing with a mortgage. Someone's lending that money. So someone in Europe decided that we're going to lend you 300K and you only have to give me back 250. I don't think it makes any sense, but that's actually, that's what is happening right now in Europe. That people, you know, I mean, if I was in Europe, I mean, why not just put your money in your mattress or in a safe? Because I don't really understand why you'd want to do that, but that's what the banks are doing right now. Is whoever's lending money is getting back less money than they're lending, and whoever is putting their money in the bank every day, you're just having them take money from you. So it's hard. I can't really explain it any other way because it just doesn't really make sense. Right. So why are they doing that? What they're essentially trying to do is force everybody to spend all the money they have. Because they're saying if you put your money in the bank, you're just going to lose it. So just go spend it. Which in the short run, I mean, yeah, if everyone just goes out and spends all their money, I guess that could boost the economy. But that's a really horrible long-term strategy One of the best examples I heard is that low interest rates or negative interest rates is just like being really drunk. You know, it seems like a great idea at the time, but then you wake up and you're like, what just happened? And I think from a financial standpoint, that's kind of what this is, because eventually interest rates will have to go back up and no one's going to have any savings. So from a practical standpoint, what I would recommend, I guess, to everyone here is you should take advantage of the 401k. I think everyone here should be financially responsible, be very careful with debt. You know, now's the time, I think, it's always the best time to try and reduce your debt. And even though, you know, there's not a lot of benefit to saving your money from an interest rate standpoint, I think from a financial responsibility standpoint, I think, you know, if you take advantage of the 401k, I think that's a great thing to do. And, you know, now's the time to be extra financially prudent. Be careful, because you're borrowing money right now at very low interest rates. At some point, those rates go up. If you have a lot of debt, you're going to have a really tough time. And that's why I think a lot of these countries are just going to start imploding, because they're borrowing money now at like 1% or negative 1%. But what happens when those rates go to 5%? They're all going to go bankrupt. Okay, so that was on the negative interest rates first. And the second part of your question was on debt service. Okay, so debt service, it's kind of a funny thing. You know, most of the time when we take a loan, it's just like someone takes a mortgage on a house, you want a fixed rate. So you know, quote unquote, what your debt service is going to be. Well, when they're dropping interest rates, if you take a fixed rate loan, then you don't get any benefit. So as rates go down, your debt service doesn't go down. So this has been something that we've been thinking about, and I'll give you an example of something that didn't even occur to me. Was in October when we bought 1.0, we took a loan that was based at LIBOR plus 425. LIBOR was like 250 back then, and they were talking about raising rates at the time, and rates went up very high in December, and I'm like, oh, we're geniuses, because, you know, we did this before rates went way up. You know, we were very proud of ourselves. And then now rates plummeted this year. And I was thinking, well, this is great, because LIBOR changes every month. So as LIBOR goes down, our debt service will go down. What we never looked at was that the lenders put in our loan docs a floor. So even if the rates go down, you don't get any benefit of it. You don't get any benefit from those rates going down. We had never thought of it, because at the time it just looked like they were going to raise rates. So who cared about having a floor rate? So what we're having to decide now, and this is kind of a big thing, when we go to refinance or we go to buy a new deal, one, do you want to take a fixed rate? And then if you take a floating rate, can you get the lender to give you the benefit of, as the rates drop, will your debt service drop? And so that's kind of a battle that we're doing right now, where economically you have to make a decision. And, you know, so anyway, that's the debt service question. Hopefully that made some sense. Trying to explain negative interest rates. Okay, is that,
We'll be back in a minute.
I'll be back. Okay, I'll be back in a minute.
So, in continuing the did we win, I would say that Andy and Sandra worked very, very hard on a bunch of programs, and the executive team committed to looking at using the CRAVE strategy, which is praise, meaningful, specific, and public, as well as personal, as a goal that we